Hey everyone, it's me, John. Welcome to another episode of Itchy Mysteries. This is one that I caught on Amazon Prime. If you're a Prime member, you can actually see this for free, but it's also available. I think you can rent it on YouTube for about $4. There's several other digital platforms you can rent it on. It is called Bloodsworth, An Innocent Man. So let's start with the IMDB synopsis on this. Bloodsworth, An Innocent Man is a documentary memoir recounting Kirk Noble Bloodsworth's remarkable journey through the criminal justice system. An innocent man convicted and sentenced to death for a crime he did not commit, Kirk became the first death row inmate exonerated by DNA evidence in the United States. Set against the backdrop of his 2013 battle to repeal the death penalty in the state that sentenced him to death, Bloodsworth, An Innocent Man offers an intimate glimpse into what it is to wake to a living nightmare, an innocent man caught in the perfect storm of injustice. Very good description. When I looked into this, it looks like it was also a project that was kickstarted. Of course, I'm a big fan of independently created content like that. However, in terms of documentaries that I've reviewed before, there's a few weaknesses here that I want to call out. Before we do that, let's talk about the strengths. You have Kirk Bloodsworth as your main storyteller. Throughout this entire thing, you're pretty much only hearing his voice, I would say 95% of the time. He's obviously become a bit of a public speaker since going through this, and his stories are entertaining. Sometimes he adds some light humor into them. But something I noticed throughout this documentary are there's certain sections where he's repeating his story. And I just had this kind of feeling while I was watching this documentary that it wasn't edited in quite the best way. There's kind of parallel timelines that are going on initially. You have a section where he's talking about the crime that he was charged for and everything that happened around that. Then you have this second timeline, which is his 2013 battle to repeal the death penalty, but it's not real clear that that's what's happening, especially at the beginning of the film. So you just kind of feel like you're bouncing between a very interesting and compelling story where there is certainly a mystery that you want to figure out, and this other footage that isn't very well defined, but you can tell is much later. I don't know. I had trouble with how this story unfolds. I think that's my biggest criticism of it. Outside of that, you might say that his speaking style, he's a little slow in terms of his patter. His energy is not exactly as big and bright as we've seen in some other films. I'm thinking of The Fear of 13, I think, if I recall correctly, where you had just a very compelling person, a very gripping storyteller. That's not really what we have in Kirk, but the story that he's telling is extremely interesting. You do want to understand how it comes out. They also did this thing very early in the story where they showed a title card with his name, and then under it they said that he was exonerated by DNA, but he hadn't spoken about that yet. And I almost felt, going into this, if you see the poster for it or read anything about it, you know that this is about a man that got off. But I didn't know it was necessarily DNA evidence that was going to do it. I was not familiar with this case before I watched this film. It was just a few things like that it was like, oh, I wish you didn't tell me about that. I would have liked to have discovered that in the course of him telling this story kind of organically. And in terms of how a documentary like this can be produced, they really missed some things in terms of using footage from television news segments about this case from back in the day. I'm trying to remember if there was any. I think there might have been just a little bit of a glimpse of like one, but nothing in terms of real archival footage from back at the time. Interviews with other people could have really fleshed this out in a big way, and unfortunately you just don't get that. There's people in his personal life. You have a neighbor that basically sees this wanted poster and calls it in. Hey, I think this is the guy that's living next door to me. The filmmakers I don't know if they didn't reach out to these people and the people didn't want to be a part of it or something, but there's nothing addressed in terms of the filmmakers trying to get other aspects of this story and bring them in. What does work in kind of a cool way is during some of his retellings, particularly when he's talking about the crime and then when he's talking about living in jail, they use animations that look like, if you're familiar with the old show here in the US, Schoolhouse Rock, that animation style, which is admittedly a bit cartoony, but in this format seemed to kind of work in a kind of interesting artistic way. There's animations that are drawn like that, and then they have this kind of fuzzy VCR filter that's going over it, so there's all these, like this blurriness and these flecks that kind of pop all over the screen so that it feels old. It feels like you're watching old footage that was recorded on a video cassette recorder. That all seemed to work pretty cool, and I wish that they would have used that just a little bit more as this story went on. I got like 3/4 of the way through it, and I'm like, is there any music in this? I don't think there is. If there is, there might be just a little at the beginning, and then there's a song when the end credits are playing, but I don't think there's really any music that appears throughout the rest of it. If there is, it's so low that I just didn't even detect it. So, I don't know. I'm really split on this, guys, because the information he's giving is compelling. The way that it has been edited together in this film, you kind of go through these modes of, wow, I'm getting a bunch of info and this is cool, and then all of a sudden things come to this grinding halt and you're like, what am I watching this clip for? This isn't about the story that he was originally telling. And then later, I think it's supposed to all come together, and it didn't quite work for me in terms of the narrative coming out. I think that if they could have re-edited this thing from top to bottom, it would be it could be a lot more interesting. And outside of that, I feel like there's probably only really an hour of him speaking, but this film is an hour and 20 minutes long, and it feels like it was padded to me. I'm just going to be perfectly honest. There's literally parts where he's repeating the same information. There's one scene in particular where he is in the prison that he was in, and he's talking about the last time he saw his mother in there. And then it goes to another scene where it's just him being interviewed somewhere else, and he literally repeats all the exact same information that you just heard, like almost word for word. I don't know why some of those scenes survived to the final edit. I think they really should have kind of picked and said, okay, it's a bit more heartfelt when he's telling that story in the prison, so why don't we keep that section, and then this interview segment we can just leave on the cutting room floor. But like I said, it feels like this thing was padded out so that it would reach feature length. There is a good 1-hour speech in here. Some people might debate if he's all that entertaining or not, but still the information is. And then there's 20 minutes of just stuff where you're kind of like, does this really apply? And even when they get to the resolution of the case that he was tried for, I don't think they even show you a picture of the guy that really did it. I don't know, there's so many things kind of left behind in how this information is presented that I really struggled with it. Outside of that, this is clearly from a point of view that is anti-death penalty. So if that's kind of a trigger topic for you and you're not on that side of the fence, you might want to avoid this. There is no discussion about it going on. There's no moral dilemma being discussed here. It just comes strictly from the point of the death penalty is wrong, and he is now speaking against it and trying to get it repealed in Maryland, which some of you will be fine with, others of you won't. That's just why I wanted to point it out. It's a weird one. Watching it for free, I don't feel like I got ripped off or anything. Even if I would have paid $3 or $4 for it, I probably would have felt like it's an okay rental. I certainly wouldn't buy it, and I think the purchase price on it is about $10. I just really personally feel like the filmmakers fell short on two very big fronts. Number one, their research. I think if they would have reached out, gotten some other people, woven those interviews in to support the information that Kirk was saying, it could have added a lot to this film. And to the editing, it's just, I don't know how experienced the editor is. I haven't looked at his credits in IMDB, but I would imagine that this is someone's very early past in terms of their editing career. The storytelling in it just does not work. It's almost to the point where I felt like it was being told out of order. And the way that it pulls away from the main story to the secondary story, the way that they tried to weave that together, it didn't work for me. Ultimately, I think this is a 5.5 for me. Now, I have to admit, I think I'm low compared to the scores that I'm seeing online. I think it's getting somewhere around a 7. It's still a very compelling story. You've got a DNA exoneration story, the first in the U.S. going on here. So I think it's an important story to tell. I think many of you out there will enjoy that aspect of it. But in terms of it being really gripping and moving well, it doesn't do that. In terms of it being a time capsule to transport you back to the time of this crime happening, outside of the Schoolhouse Rock type visuals, there's practically nothing. So it doesn't really do a good job of that. As I mentioned, there's really no music, so we can't knock it or say that it did a good job there. I don't know, 5.5. I think that's the best I can do for it. Very selective crowd. I think a selective bit of you will enjoy it enough, but others might turn it off about 20 minutes in, especially when they start getting to some just very awkward, like dramatic pauses. And for me, the flow of this is just broken. The story does not come out in the best cohesive and interesting manner that it could. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today on Itchy Mysteries. I hope you guys are having a great week, and come back tomorrow for a brain scratch, last before I go on my big vacation. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you right back here on the Lord and Arts channel.